Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Working Through It Wednesday, brought to you by the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina. We are very excited this week to have with us Melissa Rabon from the PACE Academy. Melissa is a National Board Certified English Language Arts teacher. She also holds her master's in special education and currently serves as the executive director for the PACE Academy, which is an incredible resource for us right here in the Midlands. She's going to be sharing with us today some information around dyslexia as well as the PACE Academy. So please fill out your QR codes and your survey after we finish up with our Working Through It Wednesday today so we can get your feedback and make sure that we continue to do great work with our virtual resources. Without further ado, I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Melissa. And thank you very, very much for being with us today, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having us. We are super excited about serving the families here in the Midlands of South Carolina. I have a very short presentation to share with your viewers. So if I can get this to present. Okay, so the question came to me, like, what is dyslexia? If I had to explain that. Before I can get into that, let me back up and explain to you what we look like in South Carolina as far as reading is concerned. So in 2019, the National Assessment of Educational Progress gave a report about all the states in the United States with reading. And in their report from 2019, we found that South Carolina ranked 43rd in the nation with only 32% of fourth graders reading at or above proficient. So that tells us that there are 68% of fourth graders in 2019 that were not reading proficiently in our state. Now, depending on who you ask, you might get a variety of reasons about why that is so. But the founding members of PACE, and I believe that it's because of dyslexia. The International Dyslexia Association defines dyslexia as a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. That means it starts in the brain. And it's characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. Now my screen's not progressing. Yale University tells us that 1 in 5 people are affected by dyslexia in some kind of way. And right now, people with dyslexia make up 80% of the students in special education. When we looked at the South Carolina School Report Card in 2018, we found that just in the Midlands area counties, Kershaw, Richland 1 and 2, Fairfield, and Sumter School District, there were over 4,500 students identified as having a specific learning disability in reading, which is also known as dyslexia. So now the characteristics of dyslexia. Some people think that dyslexia means that you get words or letters backwards. Sometimes they might see the word saw instead of was. But the founding members of PACE and I know that there's so much more to it than just getting letters and words backwards. Other things that you might see with a person who has dyslexia is they might have trouble with their left and their right, or knowing directions of going places. Sometimes they have a hard time finding the correct word when they're talking or when they're writing, and that can come up in a variety of ways. One way that it might come up is they might say a word or write a word that sounds similar to the word that they intended, but is completely wrong. For example, they might say tomato when they really meant potato. Another way that they get words mixed up is a lot of times they'll say words that are related to each other, but they're still not the right word. Like they might say plane when they really meant a helicopter. We know that their reading is broken and choppy and slow, and that they often have difficulty with spelling. Sometimes you'll notice with a person that has dyslexia that they have extreme difficulty with little words like is and the, but they have a much easier ability to read larger words like elephant. And one reason we believe that that is true is because there's actually a visual element with elephant. You know what an elephant looks like. So they're able to make a connection in the visual side of their brain. They see the word elephant, they make a connection to what is an elephant, and then they're better able to recall what that word is when they see it again in the future. However, words like is and the and a don't have a visual element to it. So every time they see that word, it's having a harder time recalling what that word is. And you'll also see that a lot of times they have poor memorization skills. So when you get to the 3rd grade and you're having to memorize times tables, a lot of times that's hard for kids with dyslexia. One thing that we know from looking at fMRI scans of people that read is that the way the brain processes language for a person with dyslexia is very different than the way a brain processes it for a person that doesn't have dyslexia. A person that does not have dyslexia, they process language on the left side of their brain, on the left hemisphere of the brain. And that's a much more efficient way to process language. However, when we do fMRI scans of people with dyslexia, we see that they're using totally different ranges of their brain to process the language. A person with dyslexia tends to use the frontal lobe and the right hemisphere of the brain. So that literally means that language is taking a longer pathway through the brain. And that's why we think that they have a hard time recalling words or remembering the spelling of words or just remembering what a word looks like, or maybe even as small down to remembering what a letter looks like. All of this sounds discouraging. However, we know that some of the most brilliant minds on the planet are people that have dyslexia. The guy that invented the car, the guy that invented the iPhone, the guy that invented the light bulb, the telephone. All of these people were dyslexic brains, and they all think brilliantly. Thankfully, though, when it comes to education, we found a way that will actually help a child with dyslexia learn to be more efficient. In the 1930s, the OrtonGillingham Method was created by Dr. Samuel Orton and Miss Anna Gillingham. She was an educator and a psychologist, and they got together and came up with a system that would help dyslexic brains move more efficiently when processing language. They figured out that if you teach in a systematic way, in a sequential way, in a multisensory way, and a phonics-based way, we could literally rewire the brain to process language on the left hemisphere of the brain like it's supposed to. So what does that really look like? Here's a picture of a brain, and this is the left hemisphere of the brain. Dr. Orton and Miss Anna Gillingham figured out that if we can incorporate the visual elements, so children are seeing letters and words, we can incorporate the sound element of the brain, their hearing, and then we can incorporate the tactile and movement section of the brain, that we can connect all 3 of those together and make it a whole lot easier for a child with dyslexia to process the language. And that brings us to PACE Academy. So we know that all the steps that you take to teach a child with dyslexia is effective for all learners, not just children who have learning problems. If you think about it, the older you get, the bigger the words are that you encounter. So when a child gets to the 12th grade and they get to take in the SAT or the ACT, and they're having to break apart these really large words that usually you don't find anywhere but like in science curriculums, those kinds of things. If they had been taught with an OrtonGillingham method, they would know how to break those words apart into tiny pieces and to figure out the meanings of words. So we know that you can improve reading for all children, not just children with dyslexia, which is why we've designed every element of PACE Academy to include the methods that are effective for students with dyslexia. We're going to open next year in the fall of 2021 with grades 3 through 7. And we chose that because most children are not identified as having a reading disability until around the 2nd or 3rd grade, when they're having to switch from learning to read to reading to learn. So when children start to read independently, we realize they're not picking up information. That tends to be where they are identified. So we're going to start our first year with grades 3 through 7. Our second year, we're going to add 2nd grade and 8th grade. Our 3rd year, we'll have 1st through 8th grade. And our 4th year will have kindergarten through 8th grade. So if you haven't registered for the school, or your child you think is too young right now, but you know that you have a history of dyslexia in your family, now is the time to be thinking about and looking at PACE and getting on our mailing list so that you know what's coming up in the next couple of years. Every day at PACE Academy, we're going to start every single morning with ACE time. And we did this because we want students to ace the language. This is 45 minutes of enrichment time that they're going to get based on their lowest developed literacy skill. Doesn't matter how old the child is, doesn't matter what grade they are in. They're going to start in the sequence for our Project Read reading curriculum, and they're going to progress through that as they need it. During their grade level ELA class, they'll only have 16 kids in the class, but we're going to have 2 teachers in that class. So that's going to bring our ratio down to 8 to 1. So your child can get more one-on-one attention while they're in the classroom. And during that entire time will also be an OrtonGillingham curriculum with the Project Read program. At the end of the day, every student will end with the NESI Online Technology Enrichment Program, and this is an online program backed by the International Dyslexia Association for Reading and Phonics. And that means that throughout every single day at PACE Academy, all the children will get over 2 hours and 15 minutes of OrtonGillingham instruction, which is totally unheard of in a traditional classroom setting. As I stated earlier, we're only going to have 16 kids in a class, 2 teachers during our ELA class. Another thing that we're going to incorporate is a multisensory math curriculum, and this comes out of Landmark School in Massachusetts. We selected this program because children who have difficulty with letters and words also tend to have problems with numbers and math. So not all the time, but a lot of times they do. So we figured if we could incorporate the OrtonGillingham method in math instruction as well, that we'd be able to better help our students. One thing that we're going to do differently in science and social studies is we're going to do a project-based or a project-oriented curriculum with those 2 subject areas. Children with dyslexia tend to be very creative, and in traditional classroom settings, they're usually given notes on a subject and expected to regurgitate that on a test. But at PACE, we wanted to give our children a chance to shine with their creativity. So teachers are going to be trained in how to do project-oriented instruction in both of those subject areas, and then students are going to be able to show off what they have learned and experienced in those 2 subject areas. One other thing that we're going to incorporate over the whole school is structured movement brain breaks. When we were researching how to put together PACE Academy and what elements we wanted to include, we looked at Finland, and we found that in Finland, when they allow their children to move and play more throughout the day, they found that fewer students were identified with ADHD and more children experienced academic success than what we're seeing in the United States. So we know that our kids are going to be working so hard on the OrtonGillingham reading instruction all day that we wanted to be able to give their brains a little time to break and to move around and just be kids. Now, these are not just free play times. These are actually going to be structured movement brain breaks that we'll partner with the physical education teacher to create different things that the teachers can use in their classroom. It might be yoga on Mondays. It might be hopscotch down the hallway on Tuesdays. It could be a variety of different activities, but it's a 15-minute break between each block period of subject area that they're going to be doing in school. Another thing that we've decided to do at PACE so that our teachers are better prepared to teach is that we're going to do an early dismissal every Wednesday at 1 p.m. This will give parents more time with their kids, and it gives our teachers more time to analyze the data from their students. I know as a former public education teacher, a high school teacher, that a lot of times we're bombarded with data on our students, but we don't really know what to do with it, nor do we really have the time to do anything with it, with all the responsibilities that educators have on them. So we wanted to design a time where teachers could sit and look at their data for their kids, see how they're progressing in reading, and move them throughout their ACE groups or move them in small groups in the ELA classroom based on how they're doing with that data. This also gives us a chance to give parents bi-weekly reports on how their kid is progressing. As a parent of a child with an IEP, a lot of times I know I'd show up at an IEP meeting and there's all the data from the last year. We don't want parents waiting until their annual IEP review to get that data. We want to make sure that they're up to date throughout the entire school year. Another thing that we're going to do is a modified year-round school calendar. Now that's changed slightly now due to COVID because school districts this year pushed back their start dates. So we're going to have to push back our start date next year. But the idea behind this is that all children, regardless of ability, tend to forget a little bit of information when they have the long 10 to 12 week summer break. As a parent of a child with dyslexia, you don't want to wait 12 weeks to get them back into the classroom if they've already begun making progress in reading. So we're going to do a slightly longer fall break, a slightly longer winter break, and a slightly longer spring break, so that we'll have a slightly shorter summer break. And so we'll start in August of 2021 because of COVID. But in 2022, we plan to start in July. After school, we will provide after school care for a very small fee for parents. So we know that parents work often past 1 p.m. and past 3:30 p.m. So we're going to have an after school care. But during those breaks that I was talking about, we're going to have an intersession care. And this is where parents can pay for their child to come even when the school is closed. This will be during every single break except for the winter Christmas break, just like in our traditional schools. During those breaks, we're going to have different activities. We plan to partner with different agencies in Columbia and hopefully bring in some different activities. Maybe one break we'll have a soccer camp, or maybe one break we'll have a gymnastics camp. But also during those breaks, students are going to have access to tutors, and the OrtonGillingham tutors, so they can continue with their education even during the break while our teachers are planning and working for the next session of school. So if you haven't looked at our website, please go to choosepace.org. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me and ask me. And that's all I have for today.
Melissa, I was just sitting here absolutely smiling from ear to ear because this is such an incredible resource for our kids in the Midlands and for our caregivers and for parents. And it's so clear how intentional y'all were with everything, every decision that you made to support and value the students that you all are going to serve.
Well, I want parents to know that I am too a parent of a child with dyslexia, severe dyslexia. So everything that we selected was with clear intention for their benefit. Sorry. You know, this is a labor of love and we're really passionate. My entire team is wonderful. I've got a great board that is supporting me, a great project director that's helping us pull this off. And, you know, we plan to be, you know, the answer to prayer to so many families in Columbia.
I mean, I don't want to move anywhere from that. I think that's exactly where we should end it. It's so clear that you're passionate, your heart's in it, your soul's in it, and we're really excited to be able to uplift this conversation, share this resource, and make sure that all of these tiny humans get to enjoy hopscotch down the hallway Tuesdays.
That's right.
I want to
Yes.
go hopscotch down the hallway Tuesdays.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Melissa. I know our community is going to be so excited to hear about this resource, and hopefully other states will be able to pick up some of these models and replicate it and be able to serve their kiddos too, especially.
Well, we know there's already one school like us in Easley, South Carolina. They're called Lakes and Bridges. And then there's another group that's forming one in the Charleston area. They're called the Gates School. So if I put a plug in for them as well, they're opening next school year just like we are. You know, and we're all the people involved in all three groups, we're all like-minded people. We all know how important it is for our kids with dyslexia across the street. So we've got now a line that goes diagonal across the state for schools, and we're hoping to get the other corners, you know, in the next couple of years. So
absolutely. Aim high, dream big, serve our kiddos, and love our community. So thank you so much for being with us today, Melissa. This has been fantastic. Please, y'all, go ahead and fill out your surveys and speak towards how wonderful Melissa is and how great this resource is going to be for our communities here in the Midlands. And we'll make sure that we'll put the website up on our Facebook and make sure that everyone is aware that this awesomeness is coming our way. So thank you so much, Melissa, and I look forward to speaking with you again here in the near future.
Thank you very much. You guys have a great day.
All right.